Seraphine awoke to a world that felt both familiar and alien. The sunlight creeping through the curtains seemed almost intrusive, painting the walls in gold, but doing nothing to illuminate the darkness festering within her heart. Her body ached, not from sleep, but from the weight of anticipation, the gnawing tension of unspoken desires. Memories of the previous nights swirled in her mind. Every touch, every whispered word, every glance that carried a secret flame. She felt herself split in two, one part craving the intensity of forbidden connection, the other shivering at the thought of moral ruin. The past and present collided like storm fronts, leaving her disoriented, fragile, and trembling. As she dressed, each movement became a ritual, a desperate attempt to anchor herself in a reality she barely recognized. She remembered fragments of childhood lessons, maternal guidance, societal expectations, all whispering warnings she was too intoxicated by her own impulses to heed. The familiar space of her apartment now felt like a cage, each object a subtle reminder of the life she had promised herself, but was systematically dismantling. Her heart raced, her mind a whirlwind of guilt, desire, and anxious anticipation. Every sound outside, the honk of a car, the laughter of a passerby seemed amplified, echoing the chaos within. Seraphine left the apartment, the city streets stretching before her like an open stage. The world seemed indifferent, yet she felt every gaze as if it pierced her very soul. Walking past strangers, she imagined their curiosity, their judgment, and the hypothetical exposure of her hidden truths. Each step was a tightrope act. One wrong move and the life she had carefully balanced could collapse. Her mind wandered to Evander, the magnetic pull of his presence, the memory of his touch sending shivers down her spine. Desire and dread mingled, forming an intoxicating, paralyzing cocktail. She realized that the risk she had embraced carried the thrill of exhilaration only matched by the weight of potential devastation. The office was no sanctuary. Every interaction, every forced smile, every casual remark felt like a probe into her secret. Colleagues, conversations seemed layered with double meanings, and laughter became a weapon against her fragile composure. Seraphine's pulse quickened with each glance at Evander, each subtle cue from Lucinda, each whisper that reminded her of the emotional quagmire she had created. Her mind was a storm, ideas colliding violently. Confess, conceal, run, stay. Every choice seemed equally dangerous. She felt the invisible strings of fate tightening, weaving a net from which she could not escape, a web spun entirely from her desires and mistakes. Lunch with Evander was a collision of restraint and indulgence. Seraphine felt the magnetic pull, the delicious tension that made her heart pound and her hands sweat. Conversations flowed like rivers over sharp rocks, smooth at first glance, but threatening to cut deep. Every accidental touch, every lingering look was a spark, igniting the furnace of forbidden desire. She struggled to maintain control, but the intensity of her attraction made each moment unbearable. Internal moral arguments warred with raw passion, each thought more feverish than the last. She knew she was walking the edge of a cliff, each step forward threatening a fall from which recovery was impossible. Evening descended, painting her apartment in shadows that seemed almost sentient. Seraphine stood before the mirror, examining her reflection with a scrutiny that was both obsessive and terrifying. Each imperfection, each subtle change in expression, became a narrative of guilt and longing. Her mind replayed every encounter, every choice, every deception, each layer peeling back to reveal a deeper fracture of her psyche. The room, once a haven, now felt alive with judgment, a silent witness to her moral unraveling. She could feel the storm approaching, inevitable, merciless, a reckoning that would leave nothing untouched. And yet, a strange thrill coursed through her veins, a dark recognition that she had willingly chosen this path, that the chaos and ruin were of her own making. Seraphine walked through the dimly lit streets, every neon glow reflecting fragments of her inner turmoil. Her thoughts replayed every moment of desire and every act of betrayal with meticulous clarity, the way a storm retraces its own thunderous path across a dark sky. Each memory carried with it a weight she could not escape, every touch from Evander, every secret glance, and the subtle pull of temptation that had guided her actions. The thrill of forbidden pleasure battled violently with the guilt gnawing at her conscience, leaving her breathless and disoriented. Shadows stretched along the walls like silent witnesses, the city itself seeming to mirror the chaos festering within her heart. Her childhood lessons, once etched in certainty, clashed against the raw impulses of adulthood. Maternal warnings, societal norms, and the moral compass she had clung to now felt fragile, almost meaningless. Desire was no longer a fleeting indulgence. It was a powerful force shaping every decision, every movement. Seraphine realized with terrifying clarity that she had constructed a labyrinth from which turning back was no longer an option. Each choice drew her deeper, the stakes escalating beyond comprehension, while the part of her that longed for freedom screamed in vain. The apartment was suffocating. Each object, the worn sofa, the half-empty coffee mug, the faint scent of evander, became a reminder of a tangled web she had spun. The walls seemed to close in, echoing the mounting tension that coursed through her body. Messages flashed across her phone, teasing, accusing, pleading, each one a nail driven into her fragile composure. The delicate balance between her private desires and public life teetered dangerously on the edge of collapse. Every glance from a stranger, every passing footstep outside the window, felt like a judgment passed upon her soul. Her mind churned with scenarios: confess, conceal, run, stay. Each option was riddled with consequences, each outcome darker than the last. The storm within her was relentless, refusing any moment of peace. Her body ached from the internal conflict, her heart hammering with the anticipation of exposure, her pulse synchronized with the dangerous allure that had entrapped her in this game of temptation and secrecy. Lunch with Evander was a maelstrom of tension, disguised as casual conversation. Words danced across the table, laced with double meanings, loaded glances, and unspoken promises. Seraphine's pulse raced, each beat echoing the forbidden excitement that surged through her veins. Her hands fidgeted, betraying the turmoil she attempted to mask with poise. Every brush of his fingers, every subtle tilt of his gaze, was an unspoken invitation into the vortex she both feared and craved. Her moral compass screamed in defiance, yet desire held her in chains. The past collided violently with the present, each memory intensifying the stakes, each sensation pulling her further into emotional peril. Her mind fractured into fragments of guilt, lust, anxiety, and exhilaration, a chaotic tapestry that threatened to overwhelm every rational thought she had ever possessed. In the quiet cafe later that day, Seraphine witnessed a fleeting interaction that shattered her fragile equilibrium. Evander leaned toward another woman, laughter spilling from his lips, igniting a storm of jealousy and betrayal within her. The pang of desire and the sting of hurt intertwined, sending shivers down her spine and a lump to her throat. Her pulse accelerated, her stomach knotted with the sudden realization that the delicate control she had maintained was now slipping through her fingers like sand. Each heartbeat magnified the tension. Each breath felt like walking on the edge of an emotional cliff. The collision of lust, guilt, and fear became almost unbearable, leaving her reeling. She knew the cracks were widening. Her carefully maintained illusions were beginning to crumble, and the consequences of exposure loomed like a gathering tempest, ready to strike with merciless force. Night fell with oppressive weight, the darkness outside reflecting the chaos within her. Seraphine paced her apartment, the wooden floors creaking under the rhythm of her mounting anxiety. The anticipation of revelation, the fear of judgment, and the desperate longing for connection collided violently within her, forming a storm that left her breathless and trembling. Shadows on the walls stretched and warped, almost sentient in their eerie mimicry of her internal turmoil. Her mind spiraled through every potential consequence: confrontation, confession, escape, or denial. The emotional tempest roared louder with every passing minute, refusing to be ignored. And yet, beneath the fear and guilt, there was a dark thrill, a recognition that she had willingly stepped into this storm. The night was alive with tension, every sound amplified, every shadow a reminder that the unraveling of her life had begun, and there was no turning back. Seraphine awoke to the dim light of the early morning, the silence of the apartment pressing in around her like an unseen hand. Memories of her transgressions clawed at her mind relentlessly, each one sharper than the last. She replayed the stolen moments with Evander, the fleeting touches that ignited forbidden fires, and the secret smiles exchanged with Lucinda, all entwined in a complex web of desire and guilt. Her body reacted before her mind could intervene, heart racing, palms slick with anxiety, and a pit of dread twisting in her stomach. She felt simultaneously alive and suffocated, knowing that every step forward pulled her deeper into a labyrinth from which there was no escape. The city outside moved with a cruel indifference, and yet Seraphine felt every passing glance, every whisper of wind, as if the world itself conspired to reveal her secrets. Her moral compass, once clear and unwavering, now spun wildly, leaving her disoriented and vulnerable. Desire, fear, and guilt collided inside her, creating a storm that threatened to consume every fragment of rational thought. Every object in her apartment, the books strewn across the floor, the faint scent of perfume lingering in the air, the half-empty coffee mug, became a symbol of her unraveling, reminders of a life she could no longer reconcile with her actions. By midday, the fragile facade she maintained began to crack. Each interaction at work, each casual conversation, carried hidden dangers. Lucinda's subtle inquiries, Evander's glances that lingered too long, and the unspoken awareness of colleagues threatened to expose the tangled reality of her double life. Seraphine's heart pounded with the knowledge that the mask she had worn so diligently was slipping, revealing the chaotic emotional landscape she desperately tried to conceal. Every word felt loaded, every gesture a potential misstep that could unravel everything she had built. Her mind spun with counterfactuals and scenarios, replaying possible outcomes in endless loops. The tension in her chest grew unbearable, a physical manifestation of the internal storm. Fear and exhilaration merged into an almost intoxicating cocktail, leaving her simultaneously paralyzed and compelled to continue the dangerous dance she had begun. The evening brought no relief. Seraphine returned home to find her sanctuary transformed into a chamber of tension and looming dread. The shadows cast by the dim light seemed almost sentient, reaching out to accuse and remind her of her choices. Messages from Evander and Lucinda flashed insistently on her phone, each ping amplifying her anxiety. She felt the weight of every secret pressing against her, a tangible, suffocating force that refused to relent. Her thoughts collided violently, a maelstrom of longing, fear, and guilt, leaving her physically exhausted and emotionally drained.
If this story hits you, you can support the channel with a quick hype.
Every surface in the apartment, from the polished kitchen counters to the faintly worn carpet, reflected fragments of her duplicity. She realized with chilling clarity that the consequences of her actions were no longer abstract. They were imminent, real, and inescapable. And yet, despite the fear, there remained a dark, compelling thrill, a recognition that she had willingly set the stage for this storm, and now had no choice but to endure its full fury. The call came unexpectedly. Evander's voice, calm yet commanding, reverberated through the speakerphone, breaking through the tense silence of the apartment. "We need to meet," he said, each word a blade cutting through the fragile composure she had maintained. Seraphine's hands shook as she contemplated the meeting, the confrontation, the inevitable exposure. Her mind raced with possible defenses, apologies, and strategies, but she knew deep down that nothing could fully mitigate the emotional devastation that awaited. Her heartbeat accelerated, every muscle in her body tense with anticipation and dread, as if bracing for an impact that could not be avoided. By nightfall, Seraphine's world felt as though it had split open, revealing the raw, jagged edges of her life. She wandered through her apartment like a phantom, haunted by the echoes of conversations, touches, and fleeting smiles that had now become instruments of her torment. The weight of guilt pressed on her chest, constricting her breathing, twisting her insides with relentless force. Every choice, every desire, every secret was now a chain that bound her, and the realization of the inescapable consequences created a dizzying sense of vertigo. Yet, amidst the suffocating despair, there was a faint, dangerous pulse of exhilaration, a reminder that she had willingly walked into this labyrinth, and there was no turning back. Seraphine could feel the tremor in her hands as she stepped into the dimly lit cafe where Evander had arranged the meeting. Every nerve in her body was on edge, each heartbeat resonating like a drum of impending doom. Her mind replayed every choice, every touch, every secret that had led her here, and she felt simultaneously exhilarated and petrified. The room's familiar hum seemed distorted, every whispered conversation slicing through her consciousness, magnifying her awareness of the precariousness of her existence. She knew that one misstep, one wrong glance, or one poorly chosen word could unravel the fragile web she had built, exposing every hidden desire to the unforgiving light of reality. The confrontation began subtly, with Evander's piercing gaze cutting through her defenses like a knife. Words exchanged were loaded, each syllable weighted with accusation, longing, and suppressed anger. Seraphine's stomach knotted, and her throat tightened as she struggled to maintain composure. Lucinda's presence intensified the tension, her calm, piercing eyes reflecting a silent awareness of everything Seraphine had tried to conceal. Every interaction became a dangerous dance, a test of willpower and restraint, as emotional truths collided violently with unspoken desires. Seraphine felt her internal stability unraveling, the storm within her intensifying to a near-unbearable level. The cafe felt like a pressure cooker, each passing second intensifying the emotional turbulence inside Seraphine. Her thoughts spiraled uncontrollably, confessions that might absolve her, lies that might protect her, and strategies that seemed increasingly futile. Every gesture, every subtle movement from Evander and Lucinda was a potential spark to ignite the emotional firestorm. She felt both hunted and entranced, a duality that left her paralyzed yet compelled to engage. The physical manifestation of her anxiety was undeniable, palms slick with sweat, muscles tense, and chest constricted, as if the consequences of exposure were already pressing down on her very body. The confrontation escalated rapidly, a crescendo of emotion that left no room for pretense. Voices rose, accusations flew, and long-buried truths erupted with the force of a tidal wave. Seraphine's heart pounded as each revelation peeled back the carefully constructed layers of her duplicity, leaving raw, exposed nerves vulnerable to the chaotic interplay of desire, anger, and betrayal. The world around her seemed to constrict, as if the cafe itself had shrunk to contain the intensity of the emotional tempest. Every glance, every tremor of voice, every subtle shift in posture became magnified, pushing her closer to the edge of emotional collapse. Morning light broke through the shattered emotional night, filtering into Seraphine's apartment like fractured rays of truth. The wreckage of her relationships lay scattered, palpable in the silence that now enveloped her. She sat amidst the remnants of her choices, every object a mirror reflecting the devastation of her decisions. Emotions collided violently within her, remorse, fear, longing, and a dark exhilaration that she could not suppress. The consequences of desire, deception, and unbridled human emotion were now unavoidable, each one etched deeply into the fabric of her existence. And yet, amidst the wreckage, a faint, flickering resolve emerged. She had survived the storm, but nothing would ever be the same again. Seraphine returned home to an apartment that felt foreign, each shadow stretched and warped by her own unease. The previous night's confrontation replayed endlessly in her mind, like a haunting melody she could neither ignore nor escape. Her body ached from tension, and her mind reeled with the consequences she could no longer postpone. Every object in her home, books, clothes, even the faint scent of coffee, served as a cruel reminder of the fragile bonds she had shattered. The emotional toll of her actions pressed down on her chest, constricting her lungs with the weight of guilt. She realized that trust, once broken, was a brittle shard that cut deep with every memory of the connections she had destroyed. The day passed with an oppressive heaviness. Seraphine felt as if the world around her had slowed, each movement deliberate, every sound amplified, carrying judgment. Text messages went unanswered, calls were ignored, and each passing hour carved a deeper pit in her chest. She remembered every smile, every whispered promise, every stolen moment of pleasure that had led to this abyss. Her reflection in the mirror no longer seemed like her own. It was a stranger, eyes hollowed by remorse, lips slightly trembling as if holding back words that would never be spoken. The boundaries between reality and imagination blurred, her own guilt becoming a relentless companion, whispering every failure she had committed against those she cared for and herself. Even in the presence of others, Seraphine felt completely alone. Friends and acquaintances, oblivious to the chaos she had caused, laughed, and moved through their lives, highlighting the stark contrast to the storm that raged within her. She felt invisible, trapped in a prison of her own making, walls constructed from lies, betrayal, and unchecked desire. The internal dialogue churned relentlessly, weighing each potential decision against a backdrop of irreversible damage. Every attempt at normalcy was met with the haunting memory of actions that could never be undone. The crushing solitude was both a punishment and a reflection of the emotional chasm she had created between herself and the world. Night descended again, the dim light casting elongated shadows that seemed almost accusatory. Seraphine wandered through the apartment, touching objects that had once brought comfort but now mirrored devastation. Every photograph, every familiar object was refracted through the prism of her guilt, creating distorted images of the life she had destroyed. Her mind played endless what-if scenarios, each one more harrowing than the last. The emotional weight of her transgressions manifested physically, trembling hands, tightened throat, and a gnawing in her stomach that refused to abate. The moral consequences she had ignored for so long now bore down on her, an unyielding reminder that desire without restraint can leave permanent scars on the soul. Seraphine's body and mind felt pushed to their absolute limits. She sat on the edge of the sofa, staring at the floor as if it held answers she could never find. Memories of Evander, stolen glances, forbidden touches, and secret rendezvous swirled violently, each one a testament to the self-inflicted chaos that now defined her life. Her breathing was shallow, heart-pounding, hands gripping the edge of the cushion as if it could anchor her against the storm within. She understood that the path she had chosen carried consequences far greater than pleasure or regret. It was a psychological unraveling that threatened to consume every fragment of her identity. And yet, in the darkness of her despair, a faint ember of defiance glimmered, a whisper that she might survive, but only as someone irrevocably altered by the fire she had walked into. Seraphine awoke to silence so thick it pressed against her like water, every creak of the apartment a reminder of the emptiness she had created. She traced her fingers along familiar surfaces, each touch a dagger of memory. The fleeting warmth of Evander's hand, the mischievous grin of Lucinda, the intimate secrets that had led to this shattering. Her mind reeled with the enormity of what she had done, her body and soul both strained under the weight of irreversibility. The morning light highlighted the stark contrasts in her apartment. The pristine order of untouched areas versus the chaos of objects tossed aside in moments of panic or despair. Every detail seemed alive with accusation, a spectral jury bearing silent witness to her transgressions. Her heart hammered as if it could break through her ribcage, each beat a drum of impending revelation. Seraphine realized that the emotional consequences were no longer theoretical. They were visceral, tangible, and unrelenting. She felt herself on the precipice of a psychological abyss, where every decision carried the weight of finality, every breath a confrontation with the void she had created within her life. By afternoon, Seraphine's reflection had transformed from a familiar face into an unrecognizable mask. Each glance into the mirror revealed new fractures, tiny, subtle, yet expanding, a visual manifestation of the internal chaos consuming her. The memories of stolen kisses, whispered lies, and secret rendezvous became shards embedded in her psyche, cutting deeper with every attempt at rationalization. She shivered as though her body sensed the storm within, the adrenaline coiling through her veins in tandem with waves of guilt and forbidden desire. The boundaries between past and present blurred. She was haunted by every choice she had made and every path she had ignored. Each object in the apartment seemed to whisper reminders of her duplicity, from the untouched coffee cup to the scattered papers bearing notes she had written to herself as temporary anchors of sanity. She felt the emotional weight of her actions as a tangible, suffocating presence, a force pressing her down and demanding accountability she was ill-prepared to deliver. Evening descended with a malignant quiet, the world outside unaware of the storm erupting within her mind. A single notification on her phone shattered the tenuous calm, a message that revealed Evander had discovered the full extent of her actions. Panic surged through her, a visceral wave that left her trembling, heart racing, stomach knotting, and lungs constricting as though the air itself had thickened. Every memory of lust, betrayal, and fleeting happiness collided violently, creating a maelstrom of emotion that threatened to consume her entirely. She realized the illusion of control had been utterly destroyed. There was no retreat, no concealing the truth, no escaping the consequences. Her relationships, her secrets, her life, all were poised on the edge of obliteration. Each step she took felt heavy, weighted by the gravity of impending fallout, and every sound around her became amplified, echoing the relentless drumbeat of reckoning that had arrived at her door. The confrontation unfolded like an inevitable storm. Evander arrived, eyes dark with a mixture of anger, hurt, and disbelief, while Lucinda's subtle presence added to the intensity of the charged atmosphere. Words, accusations, and confessions collided like lightning in a thunderstorm, each strike exposing new layers of betrayal. Seraphine felt her body respond in kind, trembling, breaking, collapsing inward, as the full weight of her decisions struck her like a physical blow. Every gesture, every syllable, every glance was magnified, reflecting the unmitigated consequences of desire left unchecked. Her internal storm became inseparable from the external chaos, emotions spilling over into actions, tears, and involuntary tremors. She realized with piercing clarity that nothing would be the same. The emotional fallout would ripple indefinitely, altering every connection, every trust, every memory she had previously cherished. The collapse was total, a complete dismantling of the delicate equilibrium she had once maintained. In the quiet aftermath, Seraphine sat alone, the apartment a tomb of what once was. Broken objects, discarded memories, and faint remnants of laughter that had once been light now felt like echoes of a life irretrievably lost. She traced the outline of the events in her mind, each choice, each kiss, each lie, each betrayal, forming a mosaic of devastation. The emotional, psychological, and moral consequences of her actions had left her hollow, a vessel emptied of previous identity, yet strangely aware of her own survival. Tears streamed unchecked, tracing paths over pale cheeks. Each one a testament to the cost of desire, the brutality of secrets, and the relentless passage of truth. And yet, amid the wreckage, a flicker of resilience emerged, a fragile ember signaling that while the storm had left permanent scars, she remained, somehow breathing, living, and capable of facing the world again. The finality was undeniable, but so too was the beginning of a new, uncertain chapter, a reckoning, an awakening, and a bitter, necessary confrontation with self.
If you've ever felt this kind of pain, don't walk through it alone. Hit subscribe and stay with us. More real stories are coming.